So good afternoon. I think it's officially afternoon, everyone. And this panel session is going to focus on the benefits of and the impacts of Scotland's economic growth in terms of those impacts being shared equitably. And I'm delighted to welcome the panel here to help with the discussions. And interesting, I just yesterday actually was reading reports. The Joseph Rowntree Foundation have just produced their annual report on poverty, and in that report they had a very specific call to businesses to play a key role in ensuring that work is a sustainable route out of poverty. Now, as Edinburgh College principal, we have 30,000 students at Edinburgh College, and the average age of those students is around 30. 40% of those 30,000 students come from the most deprived areas in Edinburgh. And Edinburgh is a kind of funny city because about 25% of young people in Edinburgh go to private school, and about the same amount of young people, 25%, are living in abject poverty. But the two most common characteristics of students that walk through our doors every year, and many of them don't actually really know what it is that they want to do or they want to be, but the most common characteristics is that they have hope in terms of what will happen by coming to college, and they want a better life. And I think that's part of what we are going to be talking about today. Gordon mentioned some interesting stats early at the start, where we take great pride in the fact that we have the highest educated population in Europe. And it's interesting, I was at a meeting yesterday in St Andrew's House in Scottish Government, and lots of very positive noises around the fact that Scotland is #1 out of the UK's 4 nations in terms of skills utilisation. So if you saw a RAG chart of performance, that one would be green. It would be saying we're doing really, really well there. Yet, income inequality is getting worse in Edinburgh. Yet, businesses are saying that the supply of human capital and skills that they need is not meeting demand. Yet, we have more people than ever in poverty, including people in work poverty. Yet, 10% of people are locked into this persistent low pay. And of that 10% that are locked into that persistent low pay, over 70% of those people are women. So we can have some green boxes that say we're doing really, really well, but we have got some significant challenges that we really need to get our heads collectively around what the solutions are. And much of what's been said today does shine a spotlight on the fact that business and society are inextricably linked, i.e. one cannot live without the other. And in fact, being involved in education and college education, I would say the same thing is that education and skills training of people and businesses should be inextricably linked. And hopefully we'll hear a bit about that from the panel. So in terms of the panel introductions, we've got Lynn, who's sitting to my left, Living Wage Scotland manager, and Rona, who's the Chief Executive of Capital City Partnership, and Marshall, who's the Chief Executive of this fantastic venue that we're sitting in today, the EICC, and Robert Thorburn, who's the Partnership Director of Openreach. So welcome. And actually, Lynn, if I can turn to you in the first instance, because listening to Alan talk there about the kind of 3 big things that you believed businesses should have embedded within their whole value system is around the living wage. And as a key manager in Living Wage Scotland, what was your initial response to that?
Well, thanks, Alan, for putting across the business case, because that's exactly the work that myself and my team aim to do, as well as put across that business case of why paying at least the real living wage can have a real business benefit. We've grown the living wage movement in Scotland and across the UK for the past decade or so, which was born from the efforts of grassroots community activists, civil society, who recognise the real harm that in-work poverty has on workers, their families, on communities, on our society, and really calling for employers to go further than the minimum. And what started out when we launched Living Wage Scotland in 2014 at the Poverty Alliance, there was 14 employers signed up for the Real Living Wage accreditation scheme. There's now nearly 3,500 signed up in Scotland, with this venue being one of them. 14,000 across the UK, Unilever, of course, being one of them too. And employers that are signing up, they know it makes good business sense to commit to at least the real living wage. But the living wage movement is about signalling an employer's recognition of the value of going further than the minimum. Now, unfortunately, we're still in the space of having to make the argument that there is a wage rate that needs to reflect living costs that isn't actually the minimum wage. So as long as the minimum wage rate doesn't reflect living costs, we'll still be talking about the real living wage as the rate we're asking employers to pay. But imagine if that wasn't the case. Imagine if the rate that the government was telling employers to pay through legislation was actually sufficient to cover everyday needs and allowed workers to afford all of their essentials and live with dignity. We could focus then on going further, and businesses would be looking at ways to go beyond the minimum again and looking at secure hours and contracts and training and progression and targeting those efforts at some of the groups and their organisations that perhaps need it most, targeting at the lowest paid, for example. So yeah, pay is the absolute fundamental aspect to ensure a happier, healthier, more productive workforce. But there's lots more that can be done beyond pay as well. And I think the living wage movement, all those employers that have demonstrated a real desire to go further, is proof that the appetite is out there. And just, sorry, I don't want to hog the time, but one point is that any growth achieved in our economy on the back of the contributions from workers to that growth that are locked in work poverty is not equitable. So it's not right, and we need to solve that.
Thank you. And Rona, maybe if I can come to you in terms of the people that you work with day to day, is that something that comes up as being a very real barrier to people taking that step into work?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it is. I think in terms of barriers, I've never come across people who may be long-term unemployed or not working, who don't want to work and don't see the value in working, and very much so want their children to have a better future than what they had and better opportunities. Sometimes, though, it can be seeing, well, what is the pathway? We had such passionate speakers this morning, and it's big thinking ideas, but how do you drill that down into practicalities? If you're sitting there as a family with a teenager maybe about to leave school in S5 or S6, what do you say to them? What is the next steps? What are the industries that are coming up? And I think there's a lot around language with that. In my industry, we talk all the time about green skills. And then people are like, what is green skills? And it can be difficult then to kind of unpick that. So it's coming up with a language that people can understand to go, I want to do that job, and here are the stepping stones to that, and removing those barriers. And my last point on it, we very much have been looking at a whole family approach to skills. So if a member of a family comes into our world with employers, say a young person gets a job, it's about working with that employer to know we can still help that person when they're working with you, but we can also help the family. We can help with other issues that might be the hidden barriers to getting a job and keeping a job and getting more skills and progressing. And so I think there's a communication thing there about saying to employers, you're not on your own, and saying to families, you're not on your own, and it's how we coordinate and bring all that together. It's like I think what Alan said, there is such a can-do attitude in Scotland. People want to do well for themselves. They want to do well for their kids. We just need to make sure we're knitting together all of these opportunities to lift people out of poverty and make the country flourish better.
Now, Marshall and Robert, I could go off script and put you both on the just pin you down here in terms of living wage as employers.
Yep.
Thoughts, please? Approach?
100% agree with it. And as was mentioned earlier, we've been a real living wage employer for some time now. And I can prove that it's a business case. It's the most important part, not the most important part, but that it is a genuine part, that it is a business case to become a real living wage employer. I mean, we're a medium-sized business, and at the moment we're a medium-sized business, and we're going through a process at the moment of scaling up to what will be a large business. And some of the things that were said earlier have really resonated with me, particularly, you know, what Gordon had mentioned earlier on about what was lacking in Scotland in his initial address, the investment in scaling up. I was fortunate enough to be in a conference a few weeks ago at Gleneagles where we enjoyed listening to people like Chris van de Cauw there, who's scaled up his business incredibly successfully, as amongst other entrepreneurs in Scotland, and so it's there, but it is totally lacking in some respects from an investment perspective. The other point he made was about transport, and when I think about transport, I think two things. One is Edinburgh's really good from its transport delivery scenario, but if you go any further north of Edinburgh, it's horrendous. We've got one of the most successful marketing campaigns the world has ever seen in the North Coast 500. But you try getting around that in a reasonable time, and it's not easy. The other point he made was research and development, which I know that you and I, Audrey, have had conversations about that in terms of how research and development can help business, how education can help business, the research and development. And I think it's really, I think we both agree it's really lacking. There's not an interest from business to listen to research and development results coming out, and there's not a great delivery of that from education. And finally, the other point he made was about the skills shortage, that blind spot, which is at the heart of what we're trying to achieve here in our wee business in Edinburgh, which will shortly be a bigger business in Edinburgh. The importance of businesses engaging with education at all levels, I think, cannot be underestimated. And I really look forward to I know we have quite a tight relationship with Edinburgh College and indeed some of the other universities as well. But it's a really, really important part. But going back to the original question, real living wage, it's a no-brainer. It really is a no-brainer. There's sacrifice to make, but ultimately, when I can stand up here or sit up here and say that we've got a 4% turnover in staff, whereas the average in the industry average is between 40 and 60%, I think that speaks for itself.
Robert?
Yeah, look, I think from an Openreach perspective, we're all about investing in our people, whether that through skills, training, investment, and it was no, obviously, secret. There was major issues with us from an industrial relations perspective last year, and the unions have worked very closely with our teams to maximise the pay of individuals that work within our organisation. We also recognised last year, like many other businesses, that the cost of living crisis was even overtaking everything else, and a large payment was made to mostly all employees that were the lowest paid to actually drive that value chain up. I think it's obviously a very complicated subject, I think, in multiple industries, but I think from Openreach, as I say, the core is about investing in those people. We've invested £500,000 in a new training centre in Livingston in the last few years, and we've even noticed through COVID the importance of bringing people together, training and investing and educating and giving them pathways, i.e. career pathways, because we're seeing in our recruitment people coming in from their second, third, and even in some cases fourth career now. So that's what our business is about, is giving options, choices, and training pathways for people in the industry. From you noticed earlier, we're obviously in the IT and communication sector, and we're part of that enabler. We're in the industry to enable all of you to be amazing and come up with creative ideas to stimulate utilising network infrastructure that is the pipes in the ground, in effect, that help you all do your day-to-day business.
Thanks, but it does seem that there's something fundamental that needs to change. You know, if we keep doing the same things over and over in the same way, but expect different results, you know, that kind of famous quote. And it's interesting, I mean, as the principal of Edinburgh College, I speak to businesses every single day, And the conversation is like Groundhog Day. They talk about we need people with the right skills, and we need talent, and we need it now. And interestingly, and this is maybe for another debate for another day, but very few actually mention qualifications and the need for individuals to have qualifications. And in fact, in Scotland, post-primary, so from secondary school through colleges and universities, individuals can spend up to and more than 13 years in our system being educated, yet we have people desperate to get into work and employers desperate to employ those people. And the system has been mentioned a couple of times already this morning, where the system itself is actually perpetuating and driving full-time, very traditional approaches to education in this fast-changing world. I think it's pretty, obvious to see that actually, something has to change. And I just wondered, Rona, Lynn, you mentioned that it's not just about living wage, that there are other things that employers could do to actually try and get that experience of people in work and excited about being in work and about exploring their talents.
I think unlocking talent and trying to tap into the potential of our workforce in Scotland is key here when we're talking about growth. We want that growth to benefit everyone, but we need our labour market to function better for all of us. So this is why I think those fundamental commitments around decent pay that relieves people from the grip of in-work poverty is, a no-brainer, as some might say. But I think if we're talking about, how do we strengthen our industries in Scotland, make them work better, how do we fix those labour shortages, match people up, skill them up, match them up to the jobs that are available. If we want to focus our efforts there, that's absolutely key. But, we need to target some of these interventions for people that are furthest removed from the labour market. So we need regulation from government to be lifting the standards a bit, in terms of pay and conditions and using those levers. In terms of investment in industries as well, I think, following the public pound and making sure that investment makes those conditions quite clear, that, we see a benefit in lifting wages higher and making conditions stronger and more secure for people, and how that investment then reaches companies, not just through the workforce that they then directly employ, but their supply chains as well. And even some of these high value sectors, high wage industries in Scotland, we might assume, well, low pay and work poverty, that's not our problem, that's not where we sit. But I just want to reflect a little bit on the work that we do, Living Wage Scotland. We work with employers across all sectors and industries. What's really surprising is that some of those bigger firms that are, higher pay type industries, right, they'll make the assumption that, we pay the living wage, that's fine. But when they go through the exercise of just asking someone in their HR, someone in their procurement, can we just check that everyone is actually getting, at least the real living wage? And they're horrified to learn that some of the people that are contributing to their operations are not getting enough to get by, and that's an easy fix in some respects. But there's much more that can be done, and I guess if we're thinking on a bigger scale, if we want to see Scotland succeed, we need all of those industries to be built on fair work. And I don't mean fair work in the political sense, I mean good work, decent work, work that allows people to thrive and actually doesn't create problems, because we spend a lot of money trying to solve the social problems that low pay, insecure work and poor conditions, lack of training, lack of progression, all of these things cause. Some of the economic inactivity that we have in Scotland and across and at a UK level as well, a lot of that is down to mental health at the moment. And actually we know how damaging poverty and in-work poverty is. So if we want to save money, relieve some pressure on our public services and our NHS, and actually see our economy thrive, we need to be getting back to basics a wee bit, I think.
And what about as employers specifically, taking the risk, or some might see it as a risk, of actually not following those kind of traditional, we need people with certain qualifications, and they have to be, as many employers say to me, they're not hitting the ground running, and my response is, well, yeah, that's partly your challenge, actually, as opposed to the education system. So, I mean, you know, do you feel as if you're bucking the trend as big employers in Edinburgh in terms of not following that necessarily traditional route?
Look, I think I can comment from an Openreach point of view. We are seeing people come in from varied backgrounds. We are seeing graduates, but we're also seeing those that are coming out of different sectors, whether that's education. We've recruited lots of teachers in the last number of years, as well as people in the retail sector and maybe the service industry, because the role of an engineer is changing. The requirements and day-to-day working that goes with it, from the traditional to what it is now, is evolving. So I think that dimension of change we're seeing, that engineering doesn't need to necessarily, in our role, be it's more the physical side as opposed to the digital element of it. And I think that's what makes it really interesting, that you can get this really diverse group that bring huge amount of varied skills. Key one is being able to talk to people. A lot of people don't have great communication skills, and we are all addicted to phones, which is brilliant, but actually the verbal is a really important communication tool that we still all have to keep going. And that's one of the key aspects of being an engineer day to day right now.
Thanks. Rona, if we're preparing young people of today for what can be the kind of distant future of work, what do you believe is the role of businesses in reaching out to young people on that journey? And I know, Marshall, you've had some recent examples of doing just that.
Do you know, when it comes to specifically young people, I would say to business, don't employ young people and then say to them, here's a laptop, work from home. They just don't have that set up. You know, they need to be part of that culture of getting to know what a business is like, getting to know that kind of mentoring that goes on every day and that. So, and I think we're picking up that young people are veering more towards jobs that are going to be in a place. So they're leaving their house every day. They're making that move into adulthood more. More and more young people stay at home longer. They don't want to be working at home at the same time as staying at home. So it's about that kind of recognising we've changed in terms of how we operate employment. They also want that career pathway and that upskilling. And this is my favourite subject at the moment. We are still locked into, and I say that collectively for private and public sector, into that 9-to-5 working. Whereas the world has changed post-COVID. You can work much more flexibly. I think a lot of us, we do pop onto the laptops an hour at night and so on and so forth. And if you want to upskill and progress, you need to have the time to do that. And if you're looking at doing a qualification or something that's in person, where do you find the time to do that if you're working full-time, whether you're a young person or an older person? Where's the opportunity to do things at the weekend? And then how do you negotiate with employers to compensate you for doing work at the weekend, so you're maybe doing less during the week? I think we need to change all over away from this 9-to-5 world and look at how can we actually make better of people's energies and opportunities. But in summation, young people, don't leave them at home. Get them into your business.
Well, I'm hoping some Edinburgh College sound production students are in here as we speak. Marshall?
Yeah, I mean, going back to what your earlier point about that sort of balance between education and experience. And, you know, I'm sure our industry is not the only industry that says, the kids coming out of college, university now just aren't work ready. I actually believe that education, there should be a balance. It's not all about experience, although a big part of it is. I think what needs to change is the way that we're educating our youngsters. Because, quite honestly, for them to be in universities now for 4 years before they get their degree, working, who are actually only in 2 days a week in university, I just think is a huge waste of time. But it's not what I think, that's what they think. And any surveys that you read say the same thing. So education experience, there should be a balanced mix of quality education done much quicker. And of course, the other side is experience and using businesses to facilitate that. I mean, just a small point, it's not just about young people. There's employment in all age groups. For instance, 40% of our hosts in this building today are over 60. So there's you can get great experience from them, and they're great fun. You know, you talk to any of them, you're going to have a hoot. So it's about you know, for us, it's very much about getting that cross section of young people, which are the majority of full-time staff here are young. And I agree with June's point about not working from home, because that's one of the biggest complaints or problems or concerns that our youngsters, our young employees are having, was that lack of mentorship. They just don't get that at home in terms of the workforce, in terms of your work. So, yeah, a couple of points there.
I mean, certainly there is a consistency in terms of demand. The nature of demand for education and skills training is changing, is that both individuals and businesses are demanding less and less that traditional full-time kind of normal approach to more traditional approach that we have to education. And again, that agility and responsiveness really needs to vamp up. But that does require not just institutions to do things differently, but actually government policy drivers and the systems around us that are supporting both businesses and education. I'm conscious of time and wondered if there was any kind of final comments from the panel that you wanted to make, and then maybe if there's anybody who wants to ask a question from the floor, please stick your hand up and we'll come to you.
I would just like to say it's an appeal to UK and Scottish Government. Recognise the importance of tourism. Recognise how important that is to the people of Scotland and our economy. There needs to be better education between, better communication between education and business if you're going to move things forward with that. And finally, on a practical note, up until 2021, I think it was, Scottish Government had a minister in charge of tourism. Now we don't, and I think it's because it forms such a large part of our economy in Scotland, it requires complete focus from Scottish Government on that, and I would urge that we get a full-time Minister of Tourism. Not to say that the current person isn't doing any good, but he's got a very wide remit, and I think we need concentrated focus in tourism.
Thank you, Marshall. Any final observations?
Yeah, can I just mention about, for us, it's much more about regional working now, not just about Edinburgh. Post-COVID, people are living, they've moved out of Edinburgh, but still working in Edinburgh. And there's a difference between jobs that require footfall, require you to be there, and jobs that you can do at a higher skilled level from home, and how we compensate that and how we recruit around that. So I think we need to kind of, Edinburgh's the most wonderful city, passionate, love it, but it's a bigger area now that we need to be thinking about and tackling these problems.
Agree.
I think just one comment from us is the fact that what we hear from local authorities is it's the west to east migration and the depopulation of parts of Scotland. So whilst this is driving the Scottish economy, we would like to, from our perspective, drive connections into locations that allow choice, i.e. bringing people into workplace that may not necessarily be able to navigate to Glasgow or Edinburgh, bring the disability group back into play, because we hear quite a lot about digital connectivity being the core lead to get people back into work. So I think from our side, it's about providing that enabler, but it's also that very rural aspect. And Scotland's an amazing country of geography, but equally very challenging to navigate. If we can break that down with digital and give people choice, I think that's part of our sort of anatomy really, and how we feel that we're the fabric of Scotland as well.
Lynn, last but not least.
So I absolutely agree that we need a kind of targeted industrial strategy for growth in Scotland. What I would like to see is that the focus on tackling low pay and precarious work is embedded into those approaches, and recognising that that's not going to play out the same for different types of sectors and industries. So we need to understand more about where to target our efforts, but for all public levers to be applied where possible to make that change, but for more business leaders like Alan to be flying the flag for the business case for living wage, living hours and broader fair work practice.